Welcome to the second part of Chapter 13, where we're going to take a look at ethics. Now, ethics is something that should be something we're all familiar with, but I don't know that it is something that is emphasized adequately when it comes to computing. Now, the term ethics refers specifically to overall standards of moral conduct. And even if you don't agree with the word moral, overall standards of conduct when it comes to how we behave in our community. Now, there are individual ethics, religious beliefs, country, race, and cultural ethics, but we're going to go with kind of this overall agreed upon right and wrong type ethics. Now, for this course, there's a couple type of ethics that matter a great deal. The first is workplace or business ethics, which is how you behave in the workplace. We've had a little bit of a focus on your future career in our reflection of technology, and we'll see that play out somewhat in this chapter. And then also computer ethics, how you behave when using your computer. And these ethical guidelines are not just our individual moral compass, but many of these ethical decisions have already been laid out for us by our company, our school, our society, and we'll take a look at that next. So when we're thinking about these type of ethics, let's look at kind of the ethical use of things that we consume online when we're talking about books and web-based articles. Now, everything that we consume online, if we go back to the first part of this chapter, is copywritten. Now, when we say copywritten, it doesn't mean that it is necessarily registered with the Library of Congress as a copyright. Excuse me. But it is copywritten and protected. So when you are using someone else's text from a website or using someone else's text from a book, that needs to be credited to avoid plagiarism. And plagiarism is simply the act of presenting someone else's work as your own. If you turn in a paper using a sentence from an article, even if you can't think of a way to word it better, you are plagiarizing that person. Now, that is a violation of copyright law and unethical. It's unlikely if you plagiarize on a paper that your professor is going to call the police. But with it being an unethical act, you may get a low score. I know when students plagiarize in my class, it's an automatic F either on the assignment or in the course. Now, the technology that supports instructors and powers that be in combating plagiarism are online tests. One tool that helps you do your grammar, Grammarly, I certainly can use it, also has a plagiarism detector. So as I've been reading the reflection of technology assignments that you've been doing, I've also been running those through Grammarly.com to detect any plagiarism. Blackboard also has a similar tool. So, what are examples of plagiarism? Plagiarism is a student including a few sentences or a few paragraphs written by another author in his essay without crediting the original author. Not plagiarizing is placing that text inside quotation marks and crediting the original author with a citation or with a footnote. Okay? So what this means is that to make sure you're not plagiarizing, you have to do a little bit extra work. And you don't get to take a shortcut, because when you don't do this, you're doing this. Okay? So, plagiarism is an ethical concern, but it is also something we have to make sure that we pay attention to, because it will impact how you do in your academic career. The next one is the ethical use of music and ebooks. Now, let's talk about the ethical use. The ethical use would be using short clips to demonstrate a point, but not using the complete work. But I think we're most familiar with the unethical use of music in the terms of music sharing. Now, everyone talks about Napster, but there are hundreds of ways to download music from peer to peer sites without compensating the artist or the record label, and that's a violation of copyright law and an unethical act. Now, I think music is easy to understand. If you have a album on your phone that you did not pay for, just to put it plainly, you may be engaging in music sharing, which is a copyright violation. Now, ways to get around this is to use streaming sites. So, Spotify, which is featured here, Apple Music, Deezer. These are ways that you can get access to music, iTunes, without engaging in copyright infringement. Now, we can go on a little bit further. The RIAA is the governing body, Recording Industry of America Association, and they sue individuals, which I think is somewhat of a drastic way to do this, but that's how their way to deter people from stealing music. Amazon has went to selling books digitally, and that's way to their way, people are more interested in buying the book cheaply than pirating the book, but many people are still pirating ebooks. Okay? But I think the biggest one that I believe that students today are engaging in is in the unethical use of movies. Pirating movies is pretty widespread. And I'll give you an example in my life. I remember going to the barber shop, and of course you're getting your hair cut on one side of the barber shop, but there was always a real old TV set somewhere where you could see a movie that was in the theaters, and during the movie there would be a person walking up and walking out of the aisle while the movie's being projected in the background. This is what is called camming, where someone literally takes a camera to the movie theater and then brings the recording back and shares it with people. That's illegal. A bootleg copy is a copy that is made without the consent of the company that made the copy. Bootleg, of course, is a term that comes from alcohol distribution during Prohibition in the 1940s. But luckily, we could find a way to bring that term back from the dead in describing movies that are stolen. And then, of course, on the internet, I bet that everyone listening to this video has a site they go to watch movies that have not made it to Netflix and that they don't want to pay for. Now, is it illegal to view a movie that you didn't pay for? I don't think it's illegal to view it. Is it illegal to purchase a bootleg copy? Yes. Is it illegal to sell a bootleg copy? Yes. All of the things we talked about are unethical. So when you think about your relationship with the movies that you have, are you doing this in an ethical fashion? Are you doing it in a legal fashion? If not, just think about what you're doing and be aware of the consequences, okay? And just like the RIAA has been suing people for music, the MPAA, Motion Picture Association of America, has been suing people for pirating movies. So there is a risk out there, especially if you do not do it if you don't know what you're doing and exposing yourself to being caught. Okay? Here's another one we should talk about, which is the ethical use of software. When I think about this, the program that comes to mind is Photoshop. I don't know how many students I have seen editing photos on their computers who have never purchased a copy of Photoshop. But to go specifically, what we're talking about is when you download a program without paying for it, that's an illegal copy. Or if the EULA, end user licensing agreement, says that you can only install one copy and you've installed it on 10 machines, that in essence is the same as pirating software. And this affects both businesses and individuals. So, what's the takeaway from these three things? Just because something, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. If you should only install it on one computer, only install it on one computer. If you don't have the right to use the software, don't use the software. Use a free technology. Now, some software developers don't know how to stop you, so they can't. Other software developers have anti-piracy techniques to make it difficult for you to actually use the software without the proper codes and a license. So this is changing. And then, of course, there's digital counterfeiting. I'm going to leave that to you to read in your book. I want to talk for a little while about ethics at school or for a company, okay? Every organization that you will be a part of has, either written or unwritten, a code of conduct and a code of ethics. At Western Kentucky University, it is literally called the Student, wait for it, Code of Conduct, okay? You can find a copy of it on the website of Student Conduct. So just go to wku.edu and type in Student Conduct, and that will take you there to actually see the WKU Student Code of Conduct. And there it tells you what behaviors and resources are considered acceptable for you to use, okay? Then the Code of Ethics, which is included in this on our website, lets you know what our ethics are and also tells you how to report folks who are violating this code of conduct. Now, here they're called whistleblowers, but in many cases, another word we can use for folks who report negative conduct would be a hero. And I think about all of the things that occur on college campuses where students endanger themselves either by use of alcohol or other intoxicants, and how a whistleblower or a hero calls the authorities and saves that person's life. So when we talk about this kind of ethical use of resources and the code of conduct, I want you to know that you're responsible to behave within those things defined within the code of conduct, and you're also responsible for reporting violations that harm other students or employees at wherever you happen to be. Okay? Ethical use of employee and customer information. Here's the takeaway here. There are laws that govern how your information should be used by companies, okay? And we saw a little bit of this when we looked at Spokio in the last reflection of technology. The way that your information is used is something you should be aware of. Is it ethical for someone to use your Facebook post? You know, my belief is that if you post something on Facebook, you own the copyright to it. But then, can Facebook then take that post and share it and do with it whatever they want to generate revenue? That's something to think about. And then the other thing to think about is who owns the Facebook content you create on work-related social media accounts. Or let me even go better. Who owns the content you create on your company's computer? Do you own it? Or does the company own it? When you are working on your computer on campus and you're using WKU's internet to post something, who owns that content? Do you own it, or does WKU own it? The way that you can find this stuff out is by being aware of the different computing policies at the places that you are using the internet. So WKU has a computing policy, which will be the topic of the next reflection of technology. But your employer may have a computing policy, and you need to be aware of that so you know who owns the things you're creating using company resources. Okay? Cheating and falsifying information. I'm going to hit the small ones first. I direct the Career Center. We consider resume padding unethical, and this is by boosting the stuff that you've done in a way to make it seem like you've done more. When it comes to putting fake information on online profiles, chat rooms, etc., there is no real consensus. Sometimes you do this for safety. Sometimes you do this to trick and manipulate people. I think your intent determines whether or not it's ethical to do that. If you put a fake name so you can be safe because you're fearful of someone, I think that is ethical. I think if you put a fake name to trick someone into buying a product, I think that's unethical. But finally, cheating is unethical. Texting answers during exams, storing notes on smartphones, these things are unethical and are a violation of the student code of conduct. And the way that you'll see this come to fruition in this course is when you take the final exam, it will be proctored, and you will not be allowed to have a smartphone with you or any other device, because that examination wants to measure the learning that you have been engaged in, not your ability to discreetly send text messages or to discreetly access your phone. Okay? So I think we'll cover a couple more things in this section, and then we'll jump into ergonomics. So let's take a quick look at online hoax. This is where I think we've been calling this more recently fake news, where something not true is spread over the internet. Typically shows up in email and social media, viruses, and things like that. Something to be aware of when people talk about the importance of trust and what impact fake news has on us as a society. 2/3 of adults go to one place for news. And I want you to guess. Just guess what you think it is. Ding. The answer is Facebook. So I just want you to think about this. 2/3. When you are at or were at your Thanksgiving dinner and the adults in your family were there, if there were 9 adults, 6 of them go to Facebook for news instead of CNN, Fox, NBC, whomever. And if you think about this, which of these sources do we think should be more trusted in delivering you news, or what we would consider the facts of what's happening in the world we're in? And this is why this digital ethics thing matters, is because if we are being informed by sources that are vulnerable to online hoaxes, then our decision making will be based on incorrect, inaccurate information, and we will not be able to most efficiently navigate the world we're in. And I don't say this from one political side or the other, but I do want people to be very diligent in consuming news that they can trust comes from a legitimate information source. Here's a website called Hoax Slayer that can help you determine whether or not something is true or not. But also just make sure that whenever there's something that you care about, that you go to one or two sources to confirm that something's true and not just assume something is true based on one headline that you click. Okay? Digital manipulation. This is where people alter photos. I think digital manipulation is one term. I think the term that we hear most is photoshopped. In essence, this means that what I'm seeing is not the real content. Things to think about. What does this do? It can misquote people, repeat comments out of context, create false or misleading photographs. In essence, we can use this to change what something really meant. So be careful about things that are digitally manipulated. And I think we are going to stop there. Okay? We're going to pick up in the next part on ergonomics. And thank you.